Are you sick and tired of feeling self-conscious about your skin and being overwhelmed by searching for solutions to your redness, your itchiness, your discomfort that are caused by conditions such as eczema and psoriasis? These conditions not only affect our skin and our health, but they affect our very ability to communicate in the world and feel confident in our own body. There is something you can do about it that doesn't just rely on steroid creams and risking topical steroid withdrawal. We're going to delve into the world of scientifically proven natural treatments for serious skin conditions like dermatitis, eczema, and acne. By the end of this video, you're going to be equipped with many tools you can use to get to the root cause of your skin issues so you can feel confident, secure, and healthy inside and out. Let's go. Number one, you guys are going to see I have a bit of suspected contact dermatitis potentially here. Understanding the causes sometimes are unknown, and even health professionals and coaches of myself are not perfect. Seasonally, these things can go up and down. For example, in the winter with the dry weather, a lot of people experience an exacerbation of symptoms with the lower vitamin D, the dry conditions, the colder weather, the more vasoconstriction of blood vessels can be an environment for greater skin conditions, so be aware of that. These things happen to a lot of people, and they are often an expression of underlying, or their expression of inflammation and underlying issues, often stemming from the gastrointestinal tract or nutrient deficiencies as well, that need to be resolved. The output of what is happening in skin issues is a general inflammation, and inflammation expressed through a redness of skin. So we need to ask, alright, the output is inflammation. Why is there inflammation? What can we do about it? Usually with my skin, these things, it comes and goes. I can accept it. It's not really a big deal for me. For some people it is, and they want to get to the bottom of it. And I'm actually going to be running through a lot of these strategies onto myself as I've taken a real deep dive into the scientific literature and observation of treatments for various skin conditions. I've got this question from a lot of my clients now, and I thought to make this all-encompassing, comprehensive video that I hadn't seen being made out there of what's the objective scientific overview of the literature and a lot of experience of a health professional like me, a functional health practitioner who is treating successfully conditions out there like this. What can I give you? Practical strategies. So number one, there's an output of inflammation. Why is the body creating inflammation? Well, we often observe that some of the most common is to do with the combination of gastrointestinal issues, gut issues, which can be in the expression of SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, dysbiosis, which is just an overgrowth of other type of pathogenic bacteria. It could be H. pylori in the stomach. It could be Staphylococcus aureus on the skin, or also in the gut or around the private areas. It could also be a candida or a yeast overgrowth around those areas as well, and even onto the skin. You couple this now, like, why does that happen? You couple this now with poor lifestyle factors, sleep deprivation, alcohol intake, high stressful, anxious living lifestyle, antibiotics, anti-inflammatories, sedentary behavior. You stack all of these on top of each other, and suddenly we have this really messy concoction for skin conditions. And some people don't get any skin conditions. There's genetic reasons, even just many unknowns. And the inflammation and issues and the health conditions that people are going through, some people express it through skin inflammation, some people express it through other means. So you're not alone, but don't feel bad when you see a lot of people living a comparably unhealthy or even poorer lifestyle to yourself, and you're like, they look great. Their skin looks great. What's up with that, right? You have to understand the external layer is just that. It is just external, and it is not always a representation of internal. Just because someone is looking seemingly like flawless, I know many people in the health and fitness industry, some of you might know, very well respected, they look like they got their stuff together. They look like everything's put together, and they look like they're a picture perfect of beauty and health. But inside, they are fucking falling apart. Their health is terrible. They're anxiety driven. They got gut issues. They have no libido. They have no energy. And so you need to know that just because someone comparably with a worse lifestyle to you and worse health to you, that's not your excuse. That's not your out. That's me like, oh, well, if they can do it, I can do it. No, you guys have different physiologies, and we must deal with you specifically. Alright, so we understand the gut and lifestyle. The real thing is you want to address all of those things. How do we do that? Well, the inflammation going on is triggered by your immune system. So you can look at things on a blood panel, such as your white blood cell count, to understand whether there is at least an acute inflammatory response happening. You'll look at things like C-reactive protein, you'll look at liver enzymes, you will look at ESR, you will look at the iron panel to see if ferritin is particularly elevated, because that is an acute phase reactant to inflammation. And you'll look at these panels and you'll try and put them together or work with someone who understands them like myself. Now what we see with this immune storm is lots of Th17 cells. These are common in things like psoriasis and skin issues, and they're often stem from a leaky gut or intestinal permeability or a candida overgrowth, because once your gastrointestinal tract becomes compromised, the food compounds you consume, whether they're gliadin compounds like gluten proteins or lectins from certain plants or FODMAPs, these classifications of different chemical compounds in foods, they can trigger an opening. Imagine your gastrointestinal tract, there's these what we call tight junctions, and they're supposed to be pretty tight to help absorb things, and they open and close quickly via a tight junction protein called zonulin, and this is triggered by calcium. It's like a zipper that opens and closes. Now, what can keep this zipper open, things to pass through, is underlying gastrointestinal issues, is celiac disease, is intestinal permeability, where these compounds trigger the opening and it stays open. So what's the consequence of this? Well, the consequence of this, I have a nice diagram we'll put up. A consequence of these tight junctions open, you get then an immune system response as it goes through the lamina propria, the bottom layer, and it's now flushing into the bloodstream. And then we eventually get mast cell activation, which triggers histamine, which can be another expression of skin issues. Histamine, think of it like the smoke detector in your house is triggering that something is going on, that we need to put out a fire. So the mast cell activation, the histamine response, pro-inflammatory cytokines, IL-4, IL-6, IL-10, just these inflammatory proteins that begin to be switching on and being created, and TNF-alpha, and they begin to be created in high abundance, which trigger an abundance of white blood cells and immune cells to be created. So we see lymphocytes and macrophages, which go to try and deal with the underlying inflammatory response that's going on. So you'll look at your white blood cell count and you'll see if there's an elevation going on. And if there is, it's often indicative of underlying inflammation, a pathology of some sorts. Now you know through certain food compounds that you can definitely flare up, and your flare-ups can be caused by foods, or triggered by foods is the more accurate word, but caused actually by an underlying gastrointestinal pathophysiology issue, damage. You might be thinking about genes, and there's certainly a genetic component that triggers some people's skin towards seemingly appearing really tight and bound up, a lot of collagen in their skin, very non-susceptible to environmental triggers. Now, while that is true to an extent, we have a saying that genes load the gun, but environment pulls the trigger. And so you have to look around your environment and say, what's pulling the trigger? And we're going to get into that, okay? We've talked about lifestyle and gut issues. So you want to get to the root cause of your gastrointestinal issues. So what do? Well, you can do a stool test. You can look into things called SIBO, which I've done many posts on my Instagram about, which you can scroll back. And you want to treat that with certain antimicrobials, maybe antibiotics as well. The combination of the two together is shown to be more effective than doing one alone. So we want to treat what's going on with the underlying gut issues. So you look at things on a stool test, which you can get for a few $100s. You can get through a practitioner like me. We can order you a test, or a naturopath as well, which we have many similarities in our professional expertise. Mine is, though, much more comprehensive, and I view everything within someone's health and wellness. We're going to look at things like secretory IgA, we're going to look at calprotectin, we're going to look at zonulin, see if that's elevated. Remember, that's that tight junction zipper that opens and closes. If that's elevated, that's not a good sign. And like the other blood tests I said before, liver enzyme, CRP, iron panel, ESR, white blood cells, things like this. Then we're going to put in place a treatment plan. What do we do now? Okay, what I'm about to tell you is a treatment plan that can be effective for psoriasis, acne, and eczema. We're going to go all-encompassing, and then we're going to get more specific later on in the video. So number one is we're going to start off with vitamin D and K2. Vitamin D and K2, you want them together. K2 minimizes calcification, which is important because what's plaque made of? Plaque in our arteries is made largely calcium. So a very high consistent vitamin D intake can contribute to that plaque formation, which then the blood clot then goes off, gets stuck. We don't want that. That's obviously thinking way ahead of what could happen over many, many, many years. We put K2 with it. Vitamin D suppresses Th17 cytokine inflammation. It's that T cell immune response. If you remember, we saw with psoriasis and often these skin conditions that there's an elevated Th17 response. What suppresses it? Well, we see and observe vitamin D does. Now, vitamin D we don't get it from the sun. It's converted in our skin after the exposure of ultraviolet light. Now, we have to be careful because this ultraviolet light also ages our skin significantly. So we would ideally want a combination, and getting light at the bookends of the day before 10 a.m. and after 6 p.m. when the sun is setting or rising is typically going to be safest for your skin. So number one, vitamin D. You're going to have to dose it depending on your levels. We're looking at about a minimum of 80 to 120 nanograms per deciliter if I have my units correct. Because I've got to remember American and standard units. So forgive me if I get the units wrong. It's hard being in Australia because you have to remember both because you see both labs. Forgive me, vitamin D. Get that up to 80 to 120, right? You have to dose it based off your levels. It's a very easy test. You should be able to get free at all pathology labs. Next, omega-3s. Omega-3s are overwhelmingly good for resolving inflammation. Go look up Dr. Bill Harris. Dr. Bill Harris is one of the world's leading experts on omega-3s. One, omega-3s are going to have a protective effect from an inflammatory perspective. Not protective effect. It's going to have a inflammation resolving effect. It's also going to help theoretically, mechanistically improve the skin's fatty acid mantle. Part of our skin is made up of fatty acids. Omega-3s are fatty acids made up of EPA and DHA. In an inflammatory issue like psoriasis, acne, or if you're having some type of topical steroid withdrawal, we want to give the body as much resolving inflammatory compounds as we can. So you can look at omega-3s. You can also look into something called pro-resolving mediators, which are the constituent components of omega-3s that is a really exciting new research on that. So I would also look into that. They're harder to get, but you can find them. Go in the Discord in the link below if you want to see the brands that we recommend. What we forgot to mention was the dosage of omega-3s. Most people really underdose omega-3s, and the brands they get are high in metals and do not pass basic toxicity tests and are rancid or are not conducted under nitric conditions. So we really want to make sure we're getting a quality brand. I'm not going to say the brand publicly. If you really want the brand, DM me on Instagram. My clients get this type of stuff and I really want to take care of them and not make sure this whole thing goes out of stock. But make sure you assess the quality and the testing, omega-3 testing. You can go things on like examine.com and labdoor.com and you can assess supplements quality. But the dosage is important here. You don't have to. You can eat fatty cuts of fish, 100 to 200 grams a day, sardines, salmon, mackerel, etc. Like small fish, low mercury, high omega-3s. But in conditions with skin issues, we would typically then go higher dosages. I'm talking 2, 3, 4, 5 grams a day. Okay? If we have a supraphysiological response, an adverse response like this skin inflammation, it often requires an equivalent amount, if not more amount of treatment to calm it under control. This is not a forever treatment. This is a temporary acute response to an issue that we need to get under control as soon as possible. So a high dose of omegas. Number 3, we're going to go glutamine. Glutamine is an amino acid. It is found in meat. However, we need more of a supraphysiological high dose of it in treatments like skin conditions or gut conditions. Now, glutamine will help heal the enterocytes of the gut lining. The enterocytes line the inner surface of the gut tissue in the intestine. We're going to do something that's higher than our standard, 5-10 gram dose. You'd start at 10 grams per day and you would dose up accordingly, 20 then to 30 split dosages. Glutamine to heal those enterocytes. We would remove gluten, ideally, because if you are dealing with some type of intestinal permeability, the gliding compounds will be a common trigger. With some of my patient clients, I often, if they're really suffering, I will go to a carnivore, meat-predominant diet because I need to try and, if they're suffering in particular, if you're suffering and you need a solution ASAP and you're at your wit's end and things are really serious with your health and your mindset and your mental state, I would seriously consider working with someone to help you go on a meat-based diet. Make sure you get your blood work before and after, because there are considerations to doing something like that. You need to understand the steatorrhea, the bowel movement changes, and how to prepare your meats so you are not inducing higher amounts of things like heterocyclic amines, which are these compounds that can drive potentially tumor and cancer growth. But these are just asides to this conversation. No gluten. Think about and consider carnivore. It is something I've used with a couple of people, my clients, with success. And we will run that and we'll begin reintroducing foods as symptomology improves. So right now we're all thinking in healing internally so far. We're not going to go to topical, but that's a bit later. Next is a bone broth / collagen. Now collagen is within bone broth. Collagen is contained within our skin, our joints. It makes up a part of this. Bone broth will have a combination of these things. It will have glycine, proline, all these amino acids, hydroxyproline, glutamine, and it will have a rich abundance of these amino acids. And it's often used in treatments, and professionals like me often use it in treatments for gut issues, because these compounds are often very healing and have anti-inflammatory effects. But I looked into some of the research and it's not amazing. It's good, but it's good enough for me because I'm operating based off more of a theoretical and mechanistic perspective. If my tissues are made of collagen, we have to consider, well, can the body really absorb it if you're taking it? Well, we see improvements in some symptoms, which I will explain. But glycine helps with phase 2 liver detoxification, which is important because people who often have inflammatory issues sometimes do because they're detoxifying a lot of shit, a lot of metals from their environment, from their water, from their food, high GGT. So it shows that on their bloods that they have they're not detoxifying, not making a lot of glutathione. So we're going to ease some of that, but be aware, collagen, bone broths, they can drive histamine response. So if you or your client has high histamine levels or high DAO enzyme and it's not breaking down histamine effectively, you will want to experiment with that and be cautious of that. But to read one 2020 study on collagen, randomized controlled trial, women aged 40 to 60, after adjusting for temperature, humidity, and UV, women who consumed collagen had significantly less water loss through the skin, saw improvements in skin hydration, and retained more moisture than women who didn't. Collagen making a part of the skin, seems like these women saw improvements in the hydration and structure of their skin. All right, great. There was another study in 2020, double-blind placebo-controlled trial, similar output. In terms of skin hydration, more improvement was evident with the daily collagen group than in the control group. Subjects under 50, they showed a significant improvement in total score and moisture in the subject's skin improvement questionnaire after taking it for 12 weeks. They only did a very low dose of 1 gram. I would typically recommend to a normal serving of protein 15 to 20 grams to be well over that limit that these studies will use. You don't have to be really worried about side effects. Collagen is just made of bone, and our hunter-gatherer ancestors would consume it frequently. This one most of you wouldn't have heard of. Oral hyaluronic acid. Oral. Most people put topical. The topical serums do not seem to be effective compared to placebo in trials, which means it's the same as me telling you this is hyaluronic acid when there's nothing in it. Okay? Hyaluronic acid is the backbone of all connective tissues. It has been shown to improve skin health and skin aging. There was this study in 2021, and they showed that the skin became more hydrated and protected from dehydration with a decrease in wrinkle depth and volume and increase in elasticity and firmness by 5 to 20%. All those markers range between, and the dosage will be somewhere between 100 and 300 milligrams. Now let's go to topical. We're helping heal the internal. We're hoping to get to the root cause of your gut and lifestyle issues, reducing stress, meditation, getting sleep. For the love of God, get sleep. If you're not sleeping 8-9 hours a night, what are you doing? I know topical steroid withdrawal, I know you guys really struggle. And if you have insomnia, I know you're going to really struggle. But that's the easiest lever to pull, is doing everything possible to improve our sleep hygiene, which again, I've done a bunch of posts on my Instagram, which you can go see. But let's go topical now. Tomato oil. Tomato oil is from Southeast Asia. It's very rich in fatty acids. It has tissue regeneration properties. I haven't actually heard of it before this. Antibacterial properties as well. It's supposed to reduce gram-positive bacteria and increase the release of beta-defensin 2 peptide by macrophages, which are immune cells, possibly even antibiotic properties by something called lactone. It has there's some studies done on wound healing and the antibacterial activity of tomato oil as an alternative treatment to treat infected wounds. And there was another, that was 2015, there was another study called The Potential of Tomato Oil for Atopic Dermatitis, and they showed all of these different levels of how tomato oil can be effective as an antimicrobial to treat acne and eczema. Even being analgesic means to reduce pain, reducing oxidative stress, reducing infection, helping psoriasis, lesions, and eczema. It seems to be this pretty multifaceted, all-encompassing oil that can be quite helpful. So I would add that in to your repertoire. Next is something barely talked about, almost no one talks about, is pH control. The skin is supposed to be acidic to regulate your skin microbiome. pH is a concentration of hydrogen ions. You know that when you feel that burn in your muscle when you're training? That's hydrogen ion buildup. The skin is supposed to be acidic. Our skin should be somewhere between 4 and 6. Neutral is 7, which is like water. A lemon is like 2 to 3. So our skin should be 4 to 6. When you measure people with eczema, their skin pH is somewhere between 6 and 7, so it's more alkaline, which is optimal growing environment for things like staph aureus, which is highly associated with eczema, which we'll talk about later in treating eczema. We want to address the pH, make it more acidic, while also treating staph aureus, this bacterial overgrowth, which is common in children because they pick their nose and then they touch their face and they can spread everywhere. But adults do that too, right? So if anything, that should stop people from doing it. You can get pH strips to test your skin, and you would take it over a course of a week, and you take the average of it, don't just take one. It's estimated from a research paper that the natural skin surface on average is somewhere between 4.7, around 5. We have these antimicrobial peptides on the skin, like dermacidin and defensin, to kill pathogenic bacteria. Our daily habits, like constantly using soap, particularly soap that's not natural, that has a lot of harsher chemicals in it, and using warm or hot water frequently can dry your skin, increase the pH, and set yourself up for hand eczema. So people who work in industries where they have to wash their hands frequently, try not to, or try and bring your own soap with minimal ingredients to be kinder to your skin, so you're not constantly stripping away a lot of the natural oils in your skin and changing the alkalinity and giving yourself an environment where staph aureus can thrive. So what you can do is to reduce the pH and make it more acidic, and this is something I'm doing, is you can combine an oil. You can go the tomato oil, then you combine honey and or apple cider vinegar. Honey also has antimicrobial benefits as well, so it will help possibly with the staph and reducing the pH, making your skin more acidic. Currently I'm using jojoba oil, an aloe vera, my tomato oil is common, and I just put some honey in there as well. So we will report back in the future. But for now, you guys can start implementing that as well. Now let's actually go to the eczema piece right now, because we're going to talk, still topical, we're going to talk about eczema. If you ever have eczema, yes, there are gut implications to it, but there's also topical implications. Some people have a propensity towards eczema due to not producing as much what's called filaggrin, which is a natural moisturizing factor, and as a result, it's an environment where eczema can breed more. So staph is commonly, like we said, associated with eczema on the skin, and it can breed in the gut, the nose, and obviously the face, the skin. So I have a bias towards antimicrobials, generally less side effects, and we can use something called Australian propolis. Propolis, it's from bees. There's been one in vitro study from 2021, Australian propolis ethanol extract exerts antibacterial activity against drug-resistant staph aureus by mechanisms of disrupting cell structure, reversing resistance, and resisting biofilm. Biofilm is this structure that surrounds bacteria that makes it very hard to penetrate and destroy when you try to, with things like antibiotics. Australian propolis, at least in vitro is in a petri dish, has been effective. Now that's okay, promising. Maybe could look into that. Then there was also this other one, antimicrobial peptide MPX can kill staph aureus, reduce biofilm formation, and effectively treat bacterial skin infections in mice. You're not a mice. They're not a bad model. They're decent. Gives us an idea that maybe it's something worth trying. But we can't say it applies to humans. But MPX is actually an antibacterial peptide extracted from wasp venom that has antibacterial activity against a variety of bacteria. And they notice some very profound effects. So I haven't looked up whether MPX is available. I would go Australian propolis to start treating the staph aureus, and we would also go a nasal spray as well to treat in the nasal passage as well. You want to treat the face, the skin, and the nose, and then go in the gut and treat it as well if it is present, which you can do by a stool test. And also, we would add aloe vera as well to this topical mix. It's healing properties, helping healing wounds, help being cooling to the skin, and analgesic. Now we have this topical mix of aloe vera. You can do a jojoba oil, which matches the skin's pH quite nicely. Tomato oil, honey. You can also place that with apple cider vinegar if you need something a little bit more aggressive, but be mindful of that because ACV is quite acidic. And then there's two other things for eczema. For a cream, you can go something called marigold, which is a flower, and vaseline, apparently, at least according to, I took these notes, I believe from ATP Science, it can be quite effective for treating eczema. I haven't fact-checked this one, there is a lot of stuff here. And then chickweed is apparently quite good for itchiness. So look into chickweed and look into marigold, particularly for people who get a lot of itchiness and swelling and redness, particularly when it's warm. Okay, give yourself some relief, look into those and experiment with those. Be mindful that contact dermatitis and contact skin issues do exist. It doesn't always mean that you have internal issues. You could have touched something like nickel or chromium and metals and touched your face. Like this may have happened with me because mine is on and off. You know, it happens for maybe a month or two in a year and then just disappears. That's why it's not a big issue for me. So maybe you're similar. So be mindful that eczema, fingers, hands, like from jewelry, from zippers, from watches, from tap water, from heating elements, can be problematic in triggering a little bit of sensitivity with your skin. I've got one more thing to share, which is probably my biggest one, my biggest effective treatment for all of this, but acne we'll talk about. The overproduction of sebum in hair follicles become clogged, causes acne breakout. Driven a lot by mTOR, mammalian target of rapamycin. What is this? This is how we grow. When it drives growth, cellular growth, muscle growth, total human growth, particularly like puberty. It's like an engine, it's like a pathway that drives growth. And it can also be linked with acne because there's a lot of growth going on. And how that's connected is because we connect that potentially to dairy. And dairy being a very big driver of mTOR, which can drive growth, which also is linked to why, partly why dairy can be very effective for muscular growth, or milk that is. But we observe sometimes taking out lactose, taking out dairy can be quite effective for people with acne and going lower carbohydrate as well. And the observation of hunter-gatherer tribes who live under strict Paleolithic conditions with no intake of milk and dairy products, yet the presence of higher glycemic foods, sometimes with the starches and tubers, off and on, they show no prevalence of acne in the subject group studied. And that's the study called Acne vulgaris, a disease of Western civilization. So something to consider is taking out gluten and lactose and dairy for a period of time if it is something you have. The last piece of this has been the most powerful tool that I've ever used on people to treat their skin conditions. And that is photobiomodulation. Photobiomodulation, red light therapy, and or UV therapy. Light therapy is the umbrella of what we're talking about. Now, these are different, but let's talk about the general scope of this. Light energy is conferred in wavelengths. You remember that Pink Floyd album with all the wavelengths on it, the prism of light? It's like that. Light energy can change the way your cells behave. We know this because when the sun hits us, it's light energy changing the way we feel, secreting dopamine, changing melatonin, triggering our brain to create neurotransmitters and hormones. Long wavelengths of light and red near-infrared light we've observed has the potential to penetrate deeper to the top layers and deeper layers of the tissue. If you have the right wavelength at the right place for the right amount of time, you can increase the speed and quality of tissue repair, reduce inflammation, edema, which is fluid retention, and reduce pain. We've observed it can actually signal the mitochondria, the cell that creates ATP, energy. So let me say that one more time. Light exposure or photobiomodulation, red light therapy, and UV therapy can signal the mitochondria to create energy and ATP as a result of it, which can facilitate repair and reduce inflammation, which is amazing. This just covers the surface. You should look up some more on the topic if you want to know it. It's its own video in of itself. You could buy devices. You want to buy a device, it can be expensive, but you want to buy a device that is actually clinically effective, because there's all these different wavelengths of all these different frequencies, and you need to understand what you're using is not just some gimmick being sold to you. You should have some level of good evidence for it and testimonials behind it that are real. Now, the most effective I've seen is going to a dermatologist, showing them your skin, and asking for UV therapy. It will cost you a few $100s, but at least if you're in Australia, you'll be able to keep seeing this practitioner or keep going to UV therapy to treat your eczema or acne and skin issue. It is by far the most effective tool that I've seen to reduce and fix skin issues the fastest. The best thing to do would be all of this together. And then in 3, 4, 5, 6 months time, you should look and feel like a completely different person. And if you don't, message me, DM me, email me, get in contact with me, because we gotta talk. Because if you tried all this, gut issues, treatments, oils, topical, internal, and you've seen no improvement, you probably have something much more serious going on. But for most of you, you now have a plan. And I hope this long-ass 40-minute video has given you some security and confidence that you can do something about this and that there is hope. I have fixed and addressed many people with skin issues probably very similar to you. Very serious. It's possible. You are not a victim to your own health and physiology. You can address this, you can fix this. Begin implementing this daily and watch. If you want to see more, subscribe, go on my Instagram, go on my website if you're interested in getting coached through these issues. Otherwise, I hope you took a lot out of this.